All right, everyone, we can go ahead and get started. I'll give a little quick introduction. Thank you all for being here, spending your lunchtime with us. My name is Celia Polman, and I'm a mechanical engineer with Thompson Consulting Engineers. I started this Women in Construction Speaker Series almost a year ago to the day, actually. So thank you all for making this a successful year and starting the second one. I wanted to create a space for successful women in our industry to share their experiences and grow one another and grow our teams together, supporting each other in this area. And so far, we've had a really great time and had a lot of insightful guests. And I'm excited to welcome our first 2025 guest with us today is Lauren Perry. She is an architect and associate principal at HBA Architecture and Interior Design in Virginia Beach, Virginia. She graduated from Virginia Tech with a Bachelor's of Architecture in 2013 and was really excited to call the beach town her new home and begin designing learning spaces for the next generation. Her project experience includes K through 12 municipal and recreation projects spanning from schematic design all the way through construction administration. And in 2014, she became a LEED AP B+C, and in 2020 completed her crime prevention through environmental design professional designation to further her goal of creating buildings that are safe and secure, but still engaging and inviting, which she shows through her designs in all of the K through 12 and beyond. Lauren says her passion for student-centered educational design and her innovative approach to reimagining the typical learning environment makes work each day feel very rewarding. And she enjoys giving back to her community in multiple ways as a past member of the Junior League of Norfolk, Virginia Beach, president of the Chi Omega Hampton Roads alumni chapter, and prior chair of emerging professionals for the Hampton Roads Green Building Council. And she serves on the board for the Virginia Association for Learning Environments, A4LE. Lauren currently lives in Norfolk with her husband and 2-year-old son and their dog. And outside of work, she enjoys spending time on the beach, tackling DIY renovation projects at her house, and singing along loudly to Taylor Swift. Awesome little bit of personal information there. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Celia. I'm excited.
Yeah, is there anything about yourself or about HBA that you'd like to share before we kind of get into things?
I was fortunate to join HBA right after graduation. It's a great company for those of us on the call that don't know who HBA is. We've been around for 50 years. We do a variety of projects from community-funded, municipal, K-12. That's kind of where my world is, but also commercial we do a lot of town bank work, healthcare. We also do some work for the federal government.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for taking the time away from your day to spend with us on this. We really appreciate it. For everybody watching, we will be going through kind of some, discussion that Lauren and I have already talked about a little bit. And during that time, if anything pops up to you that you have questions about, please either use the chat that's enabled or the Q&A portion. And I'll look at those. I'll notice some of those questions coming in and find a good place to pop those up to Lauren. Otherwise, we plan to leave about 20-30 minutes at the end for a Q&A portion that's open to the audience. Sometimes that separates really clearly. Other times the people are so involved anyways throughout it that we just kind of roll all the way through. Either way is great, but please, everyone watching, make use of that chat for any questions that you have. All right, we'll get officially started now. Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about your interests, what you do now, how you got there, what drew you to your field, kind of all of your background info?
Okay, so you already heard, so I live in Norfolk. When I got the offer to come to HBA, I was really excited. The beach is definitely my favorite place to be. I grew up scuba diving, so having that so close nearby was really a plus. And obviously it's not real nice here today, but most of the time the weather's pretty warm, which is another big thing. I Hobbies wise, I love to paint and do calligraphy. I actually used to own a calligraphy and invitation company. That was kind of my side hobby to do some fun creative outlet, as if architecture isn't creative enough. And I got into this because growing up, I enjoyed kind of seeing around my neighborhood houses that were being built, and knew that you weren't really supposed to walk into construction sites, but wanted to whenever I could. And Celia, I know you and I talked. So my kind of joke is that I decided that I wanted to be an architect in kindergarten. I'm one of those people that does not enjoy naps. So in kindergarten, while the rest of the class was napping, I got sent to run errands to the office, because what else was the teacher going to do with me? And I got lost. So that's another thing about me. If you try to get directions from me, you probably don't want to use them. That's not one of my strengths. So I got lost going back to my classroom, and my teacher was not pleased, because I think she thought I was just out doing who knows what. And I'm sure I didn't make the connection so solidly as a 5-year-old, but somehow that translated into, well, this school should have been laid out differently, and then I wouldn't have gotten lost, and then I wouldn't have gotten in trouble. So 5-year-old Lauren held that grudge. And it's funny that I did actually eventually meet the architect that designed my school, and he knows both of those stories individually, so I hope he's never put 2 and 2 together. But I enjoyed kind of the idea of recreating my space. So I went to, like you said, Virginia Tech, where I got my Bachelor of Architecture, and then moved here. And school design has always been my passion. I don't know that it was so literal as that's why I wanted to be an architect. Initially, I did some projects in school, in college, that really inspired me with K-12 design, about how you can make learning more exciting for students. I think depending on your learning style, school is or is not kind of geared towards you. So trying to help create spaces for passion-based learning. So, if you have a student who maybe doesn't understand why math is important, or why do we learn the Pythagorean theorem, is that something I'm ever going to apply in my real world life? They can have some opportunities to do a recording studio, and then create a business model for their music, things that they're passionate about, so that they can realize how all these subjects that you learn in school tie back and actually matter once you graduate.
Yeah, amazing. I just love that story, that some little happenstance when you were in kindergarten kind of made everything roll down the hill, and now you're designing schools and hopefully helping kindergartners not get lost.
Yes, and I'm sure someday I will meet the next kindergartner that will come shake their finger at me and tell me I should have done something different, and I deserve that. So.
Oh man. So also, when we were talking previously, one of the first things that you mentioned was your like pet project, you called it, for yourself. When you walk into a room, you want to be able to be automatically taken seriously and respected. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and how it became a goal of yours?
So I think one of the things that I noticed pretty quickly after graduation, I don't necessarily look like what you would if you close your eyes and picture who is an architect. Probably not me that comes to mind. So I would notice that when I would go to meetings, people would think I was still in college, or maybe I was just there to take notes, or one of the other, I guess I would call it maybe female typical jobs. They thought maybe I was there as the marketing coordinator, things like that. So just wanting to make sure that I positioned myself as, even though I don't necessarily look like what the movies show an architect to look like, with the black spectacles and the turtleneck, that I still can be an expert in my field, and make sure that I come into the room treating everyone else with respect and also receiving that respect.
I think that resonates a lot too, like with just in general in this industry, is definitely historically been men in the room. And so when you have women who are the engineers or the architects, or on the construction site, like that's not necessarily what you'll expect to see. So I think that definitely resonates with a lot of people. And even the men in engineering that I work with, like we're not the typical like, oh, you got your pocket protector and
Yes.
like you're super nerdy, introverted necessarily, right? There's wide range of people, and not most people aren't going to be that stereotype anyways.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the really interesting piece of that. We maybe have a stereotype in our mind of what each of these people are, and that extends to contractors too, and engineers and everyone who's part of these projects. But everyone brings kind of their different flavor to what they do, and I think that's really special.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Kind of going along with that, what do you think impacts how other people are viewing you, and what are you doing consciously or maybe not so consciously to work to gain that initial respect and, you know, when you walk in that room?
So I'd say subconsciously, and I'm getting a little bit better at this because I felt like I didn't like that I was doing this and not realizing it. I joke that I wear a lot of bright colors. I like wearing bright colors. I'm not today, but generally I enjoy bright colors, and that's, not always going to make you look as professional. So I would find myself for certain meetings, making sure I kind of muted it down a little bit. So that you just were perceived a little bit more professionally when you walked in the room. But I know consciously what I do, and it sounds slightly manipulative, but I think it works well, and you're doing it for a good reason. I sort of tweak how I speak in a room depending on who I'm with. So if it's someone that I know very well, I'm not watching that as closely. But I think especially in a construction meeting, the first construction meeting, I am a lot more short and succinct in what I say, a lot more direct to the point until I kind of have gauged, okay, do we feel like we have mutual respect in the room? And then at that point, I am much more personable. But I have found that with some contractors or some people in the room, you have to kind of hold yourself a little closer. And make sure that you're being more direct so that you're taken seriously, that it's not, I'm sort of suggesting that you make this construction change. I'm telling you that you need to make this construction change. And I think that can also go the opposite way. If you kind of need to get them to do something that maybe doesn't have the easiest thing to point to in the contract document. So there's a change order or something that needs to happen that you need to sort of talk them into it. There's a way to do that too, I think, of sort of, hey, we've had a good working relationship, and just sort of changing it to be a little bit more friendly. And could you, I know that this isn't something that necessarily is your fault, and we're trying to all get this to work out for the school system. Could you get this handled for us? So I think there's just ways to adjust, not in a way that's fake, but to adjust the way you carry yourself and the way you speak to help bridge some of that gap.
Right. A matter of essentially knowing your audience, right? That's the same for any kind of communication, whether it's an email or you're writing a report. Like, who are you writing it for? Who are you talking to? What's the purpose? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I mean, that comes back to sort of a marketing process as well, of you're marketing yourself when you walk into any room, you're marketing your company. You don't want to be the one that the architect that tears into the room and comes across really condescending or really blunt, especially as a woman, that you can kind of come across as a B word if you do that. So you want to make sure that it's a delicate balance. You don't want to be a pushover, but you don't want to come on so strong. That's unnecessary. So you want to try and find that balance.
Yeah, that can be kind of tricky. And also, as an architect, you're leading projects with a lot of different people involved, right? A lot of different technical expertise that isn't your technical expertise. How have you developed the, I guess, confidence and knowledge base to be able to lead in all of those different areas?
I think that's been one of my favorite things about this industry, and I guess the biggest surprises. You're told in school that an architect is sort of the orchestra conductor of all of these trades, and so you think, oh, great, cool, I'm in charge. But then you have to be the one to speak to all that, and you're the face of it. If there's any problem that comes up during construction, it's coming to you first. So there obviously are some cons to that, some big cons to that as well. So I think what has been really great for me is the relationship building aspect. So for example, you, Celia, or any other engineer that I work with, I have engineers in different companies, different disciplines that I know that I can go to and say, hey, I don't understand this, or I have a question, or how would you handle this? So I think that's been the most rewarding thing for me, just knowing who to go to ask. And that extends for in the office as well with other architects, of just knowing who your system of people to ask is, and just really understanding your network and leveraging that so that you can get the answers that you need, because everyone's going to bring kind of a different piece to the table and have a different strength than you do. So if you know who to ask, you can find out the information. And there's no shame in, if you're sitting in a meeting and you don't know the answer, asking someone else in the room, what would you suggest? I shouldn't be the one that is making the final call on something electrical anyways. And then if someone's not in the room that you need to ask, just politely say, that's a good question, I'm going to get back to you on that. There's no shame in that either. I think that's one of the things that I felt like early on, you had to have an answer on the spot for everything, and that's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah, I can understand that. Definitely. You feel like, oh, I should know all of this, right? Like, I'm in this position where people are asking me these questions and I should be the one to answer them. But in reality, you've got your team behind you, and that their purpose is also to lend that knowledge and that help. And definitely, like, I know we've had previous conversations about, hey, why in the mechanical engineering portion of things do we need this certain aspect, and why do we have to have louvers in the wall here, or do we not anymore if we're changing this design, and kind of like parts of our design that then impact what you do as well. And it is really important to be able to have those kind of conversations and have that relationship that, I can go to you, or I can go to Morgan about a structural question, like, hey, is my unit going to cause you problems that then causes other people problems, and kind of being able to have those conversations before something actually happens in the field.
And making sure that, when you ask the question, you receive the drawings, you don't just flip them into your PDF set and move on. Really understand what is happening and how to make it better. And know that when you're going to someone and asking a question, or when you're receiving a question, it's not, oh, well, I think you did something wrong. I'm wanting to understand we all have a common goal. We all want to provide the best project for the client and the end user that we can. So if we all put our heads together with our different expertise, then we can make it better.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that you kind of learn along the way and grow along the way. And I know we talked a little bit about how HBA trains the newer architects. Do you want to kind of spread that a little bit as well? I think that's very useful. Yeah.
So what we try to do is give each person experience in all different facets of design. We like to have someone involved in a project where possible from start to finish, because I think there's a lot of pieces of conversations you may have had in schematic design that if something comes up in construction administration and it's a different team, or there's not that continuity, it may get lost. Something as simple as a window from, with one-way glass from this room into the other room. Well, why do we have one-way glass? We don't need that. Let's take it out. But it was an observation room for somebody understanding and observing students for a college class. So just helping to have that continuity. And I think that also, especially for younger staff, helps you see what you did well or what you did poorly. I have had my share of successes and mistakes that I have done in my own drawings, and you don't make the mistakes twice. So you learn from that, and you eat crow, and you figure out how to fix it. And it's a learning process, or you see, well, this could have been explained a little bit better. The contractor ultimately understood, but I could have provided another detail here to make it even more crystal clear, so that I don't get that RFI during construction. So I think having that continuity kind of keeps you honest also. It gives you a point of pride for their project of, this really is mine, rather than just kind of bouncing in and out of that. And I think it's good just for all architects, or really anyone, to have that experience to kind of see all facets of what we do.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you some ownership of the project and the decisions that you make, and then honestly some pride when it's completed, right? I'm sure it's
Absolutely.
really cool to see a new school that you designed actually in person and the end
Yes.
result. Yeah.
The things that were in your head actually out constructed. That there's no better feeling in the world than seeing the kids walk in and be excited, and the staff, and you maybe didn't give them the slide from the second floor down, or I know there's some projects where they had, but see them excited, see them really stoked to come in to learn each day is, that's what makes all of the construction trouble worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I think I'd like to switch gears slightly, kind of. We sort of touched on it a little bit, but one of the topics we really wanted to focus in on after our conversation initially was your differences also being your strengths. And I think that ties into the when you walk into the room and you look different than what's expected of an architect necessarily. But that's in all sorts of different areas. So I'd like to talk a bit about how your anyone's differences, not yours specifically, can be used as their strengths, and then what that might look like specifically too in our industry.
So I think that goes back to kind of what we had talked about knowing your network of, the electrical engineer shouldn't be expected to be the end-all decider on the architecture and vice versa. So really understanding who's in the room with you and what you bring to the table. Mm-hmm. But I think even within disciplines, there's different strengths that different people have. Some people are going to be a little bit better at detailing and CA. Some people will be better at presenting and knowing who to go to, and then also knowing who you are in that room. That's not to say that if you typically are the one that is more presentation minded, people minded, that means you can't grow in those other areas, but kind of recognizing what you bring to the table and leveraging that as a strength. Mm-hmm. So, that kind of has helped me fight imposter syndrome too, of you'll walk into a room that has people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience. And I can't physically have had 40 years of experience. Okay. So I can work really hard, but that's the only time we'll bring that. So what can I bring to the room? What can I bring to the room that's different? Maybe I can be the one that kind of brings people together and manages and coordinates and looks at what the problem is for the school staff and the facilities folks, our client, and the contractor, and sort of synthesizes that information and helps boil it down to what really is the root problem here. Try and bring in people, teachers are going to speak a lot differently than contractors do. So there's some kind of translation in that too. And figuring out, okay, what do we do to fix this? Because I think a lot more of our job is problem solving and people management than we think. Yeah, I've always joked that sociology and psychology is something that they should have taught in architecture school, because there's a lot of it. You're almost a picture lawyer when you're in construction. You think about law being this completely different thing, but you're basing decisions based on what are shown in documents. So in a way, you are doing some version of law and sort of trying to come to a resolution. So I think recognizing that there's pieces of that you can't change. I'm always going to walk into a room and be looked at as the younger one, but I can bring something to the table that might be different than what others can. And we need everybody's different strengths in the room to solve the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be scary sometimes to be somebody who's standing out in a crowd or a group of people, but that's also not a bad thing necessarily. Right. And as you're looking at growing your career, like if you are somebody that people remember, that's probably actually a good thing.
Right. And hopefully remembered for being,
for good reasons.
being fair and being honest. You don't want to be remembered for, her again. Right. Certainly. So that's definitely something that I think is a something you should all aspire to, of making sure that every time we're walking in rooms that we're leaving them better than we found them.
Yeah. Do you think that the group synthesis almost and translation was something that you kind of naturally shifted for? Or did you pick up on, hey, this is a need for this area and let me work on that and get really good at it?
I think it's a little of both. I felt like when I decided to become an architect, I had a great high school experience, but I did have one teacher who, kind of followed up with my mom, and my sister's younger, so they were still at the school, and we kind of follow through and say, oh, is she still in architecture school? She's still doing that. So that was sort of a chip on my shoulder.
Like in a way that they didn't think that you would be able to?
I mean, we never confirmed, but that's how I took it, for better or for worse. So that paired with, I didn't have any CAD or drafting classes. My high school was really small. We only had 80 people in our graduating class, so we just didn't have that. It was a small private school. So I felt like when I got to college, okay, well, I'm behind. I got to pick it up. So to kind of make sure that I picked up to where people who had already had some of those CAD classes were already coming into college with. So I think I quickly realized, again, I can't go back in time and have created this experience for myself. I can work hard to get caught back up. But what else can I bring to the table that maybe they don't have, that I can make sure that I shine in, and make them want to look up to me in that way, in the same way that I look up to them for their strengths.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking back at that younger Lauren, what were some things that you'd like to tell her, that maybe will resonate with the newer people on this call too?
I think just, you're always going to be learning. I felt like you get out of college and you've worked so hard to get the degree. And so that feels like a pinnacle moment that you've now achieved it. But then you need license. So there's still more work to do. And then you get licensed, and okay, well, you're a licensed architect now, but I still don't know everything. And then, as you go on, you realize, I guess when you've gotten out of school, you expected to have known everything because you've had this degree and you've spent all this time in studio. And I think that what I've realized is over time, that pie, the piece of the pie that you knew changes, but the pie also gets bigger. So the sliver that you really know, the longer you're out, the more you realize how much there is to know.
Yeah.
And then that paired with the change in technology and new manufacturing and the new products that come out, you will always be learning. So I would say to my younger self of, sort of taking some of the pressure off of, you're not going to know it all day one. If you say you know it all, people are going to smile.
You just don't know what you don't know. Yeah.
Yes. You don't know what you don't know. And sort of take that pressure off, recognize that we're always learning. My mentor in the office, I'll come to him with a question, and if he doesn't know the answer, it's, what do you mean you don't know the answer? Well, now what am I supposed to do? But all of us are always learning, should always be learning, because if you're not learning, you're not growing.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to be the smartest one in the room. Then you should change rooms so that you can continue to grow. So I think kind of taking that pressure off of myself of, you're a college graduate with an architecture degree, or you're a licensed architect, so that means you need to know all there is to know. It's just kind of an impossible standard.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely resonate with that, and I think a lot of the people in my office would too, because we've talked many times about how you don't actually learn this engineering in your school. You might take a class or two here and there that's related, but nobody's going to actually teach you how to do what we do every day in your classes at school. So you can't be expected to know everything first day out the bat, right? And nobody around you is actually expecting that of you either.
Right.
I think that's something that like I had to realize was, even though I'm expecting myself to know everything, nobody else is.
Correct.
Right. And so it's okay to be able to say that I'm not sure on this. I have questions, and get those answers from the people around me.
And I think I really respect when someone is confident enough in themselves to, and I'm proud of myself when I do it, to say, I don't understand, or, I need help in this, I need to grow in this, rather than, oh, I understand everything you're saying, let me go back and do it, and then it's not right.
Yeah.
So I think having the confidence to question things, to ask, even if it's been explained to you several times and you're still not getting it, it's more important to keep trying to get there, because it's going to help all of us in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I mean, I've learned this as like I was a tutor in college a little bit. Like some people might need you to explain it in a different way and then
Yeah.
it'll click. So also if you're not understanding what somebody's saying, maybe like taking a step back and saying, is there a different way that you could explain it? Or maybe asking another person for advice as well, because maybe they'll say it in a way that makes sense to you, can also be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I joked earlier about how bad I am with directions. My family and my husband have learned that. And so I can tell you what the tree looks like that you need to turn right at. I can't tell you the street.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of paints the picture well of kind of how different people's brains think of, I can still get you where you need to go. It just is going to be in a different way. That doesn't mean it's better or worse. So just remembering that everybody kind of comes to the table with a different way that their brain works, and doing what you can as a mentor to pay that forward, because it was given to you. So making sure you're doing the best you can to help them understand the way that works for them.
Yeah. Is there anything that you do to keep up on like learning the new technologies and stuff? Like, are you part of groups with education or, magazines or whatever?
So I do lunch and learns for product manufacturers that come in, and I also am on the board for the Association for Learning Environments. So we're a group that pushes. We're educators, architects, facility staff, who are all kind of have a common goal of making sure our schools are as best as possible, as best as they can be for our students and our staff and teachers. So kind of sharing ideas amongst that, making sure I'm going to as many hard hat tours as I can to see kind of how other people have done it, and learning from other architects and what worked for them, what didn't work for them. I've given some tours of our projects and always try to share the lessons learned, because every decision we've made hasn't been perfect. So trying to point out some of the things that could have been better. Again, maybe we could have detailed this differently, or maybe we could have reminded the contractor of this up front so that we didn't get down to a situation where we had to make a quick decision that wasn't our fault, but we needed to open school in time, so we had to do things differently. I think as a community, it just helps all of us, because our future children are going to go to these schools, so we should be a community of learning from these things.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really appreciate about our industry in the K through 12, is that it really does seem like everybody cares about that end user and the impact that it has on the community. When kids have a healthy school environment, conducive to learning, like that really makes a difference, and it will impact the future largely. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the kids who are excited to go to school and recognize that what they're learning in school matters, that helps just, we could really get up on the soapbox about that, of how important that is for our society, and how that affects everything from just your interactions with someone at a coffee shop to how politics are run. It just really, it's important for us as a society to have students who are taken care of and learning, and going to come out and help, turn around and tell me what I did wrong in their school and make theirs better.
Yeah. And you're introducing architecture to them as well. I know you have some partnerships with the high schools in the area too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to mentor several high school students, and some of them have gone on to do architecture as a major in college, so I didn't scare them away, which is exciting. And we've done some of that kind of as early as third grade, when we've done some work in elementary schools. I think it's cool for kids to be able to experience architecture and engineering and construction at all ages. obviously they're going to understand it differently at different times. But all of the high school students that we've been able to have shadow us here in the office, we try to have them have a prompt at the end where, they either redesign their school, or maybe if we don't have a lot of time, redesign their room. Everyone gets really passionate about how the spaces that they are in and interact with every day look and feel.
Yeah.
So that always really fires them up of, oh, well, if I go into architecture, I can really make a change to the built environment and change to the spaces around me. And I think it also helps you see it can't be perfect. Of, you have to really work at things and they all kind of move in unison. If the window there looks good on the exterior, that means you can't put the wall there on the interior. So kind of recognizing that everything has to work together. It's been cool to see how they have each taken that and run with it, and been passionate about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's really exciting that some of them have continued to actually major in architecture. Because I know we all talk about how important it is to introduce the younger kids to what we do so that they're interested in it. But you've actually seen the results of that, like in a positive direction.
Yes. And I mean, that was, again, I got to shadow, it was an architect in Norfolk that worked for the city of Norfolk when I was in high school, and kind of was fascinated by the sets of drawings and the plans. And it's hard to really show a student what every single day is like, because they don't want to watch me sit on Revit or write fees, or so there's some sort of narrowing of what it is. But it's been really rewarding to be able to pay that forward.
That's awesome. I think last question before I open it up officially to the chat and all of the members listening on. So as you've grown your career, you've moved into some leadership and you're now an associate principal, which congratulations on that.
Thank you.
We talked a little bit about how you gained different aspects of leadership from different mentors that you've had along the way. Can you talk about some of what you've gained from everyone, and specifically too from the women who you've seen as examples?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to striking that balance of making sure that you're coming across as confident and someone who's leading, but not coming on so strong that you're making the younger staff feel like they don't have a voice, because I think that's really important. The way that we work on teams here at HBA is we call them flat teams. So the principal in charge on the project, just because they say one thing, I mean, unless it's a safety or water infiltration type issue, doesn't mean that that's just what's going to go. We want to make sure that it makes sense to all of us, because again, when several different viewpoints or areas of expertise come together and all agree this is the best way to do it, it's a better project. So I think watching to see how different mentors and different leaders before me have done that and navigated that, of keeping the bumpers up, but also recognizing where you can give. So I'll use a Taylor Swift quote of bend where you can, break when you have to, of put up the bumpers, allow as much collaboration as possible, because I think it is really a benefit to the project. But where things are important because they have to be done a certain way, because otherwise the building will fall down, or the brick will fall off, water will get behind it, and we'll have problems. Those are the things the hills to die on, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess, how have you developed your leadership personally as you've grown? I think that's a broad question, but
I think it's hard for me to answer that, kind of, because I don't necessarily know, other than little snippets of how I'm perceived as a leader. I hope to come across as someone that people can come to with questions, and that I'm not going to go, well, why didn't you understand this? Because that was given to me, and I think that's important to pass on. I try to find that good balance of making sure that I am giving enough input but also letting people sort of struggle a little bit within reason. I know that that's how I learned the best, but I think also recognizing, everyone, as we talked about, learns differently. So how long they want to struggle for is different for each person. I don't want to abandon someone with no input, but I also don't want to spoon feed it to them because that doesn't help their growth. So each person's a little different, trying to find that good balance of letting them kind of go off and do and learn on their own and come back with questions will help them learn better, but not so far as they feel like they're drowning.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to officially open it up to the chat. If anybody has any questions, they've been listening to Lauren, please feel free to type it in. I'll notice and I'll ask her. But I guess as we're letting people ask questions, could you talk about your most memorable project that you've been on?
I would say that was John B. Dye Elementary, the renovation. And that's because I got to be on it from day one to the very end. I got to sit with third graders and go back to third grade to sort of shadow them for the day, which was really fun, and see how they use their school and interact with their school to help that inform the design. And I was there all through construction documents, all through construction administration, and got to see it open in the middle of COVID. So that was the most rewarding and also the longest lasting project. And this is a funny story. I find it really a point of pride. So I was in a construction trailer with the contractor, and we were arguing over a change order. And the change order was being rejected by us based on their daily reports that they had written. They had said in their daily reports that they had 8 people out there, but the change order said they had 10. They said, sorry, I'll approve 8 people, but not 10. And the contractor got really mad at me. And he was shouting at me, and he was really frustrated with me. And it sounds so silly that I am so proud of that moment, but it's because my boss and my mentor was in the room too. And they shouted at me, not at him. So it was one of the first times that I felt like, wow, okay. They recognize that what I'm saying has power, and what I'm saying, they're not just turning to him and going, can you handle her? So that was really a point of pride for me, which is funny.
No, that makes complete sense. It's like you were seen as the authority on your project. Yeah.
Right. Most people wouldn't be excited about being yelled at, but I was just tickled the rest of the day.
Oh, that's funny. Awesome. One question that's come up a lot on these chats that we've had throughout the year is about maintaining work-life balance. And I know you've got a 2-year-old son, so I'm sure that's a handful. How do you kind of work with that?
I mean, jokingly, I drink a lot of coffee and I have a predisposition for not sleeping. But I think what I promised myself, so in 2023, I had my son in January 2023. And that was also when I became an associate principal. And it was also when I got back from maternity leave was when I started one of the biggest projects, which was a 330,000 square foot high school. So it was a big year. And I think, having all those things happen at once can be tricky, but I think I'm really glad that they happen that way, because I work best kind of just throwing myself into it. And so when I got back from maternity leave, I made myself a promise of when I'm at work, I'm going to be 100% at work, because I think otherwise you're not, doing yourself a service, because you're just kind of doing okay at both. So when I'm here, I'm 100% here. When I'm home, I'm 100% home, and making sure that I keep those boundaries up of, obviously when you're home, especially if you're trying to solve a design problem, something just pops into your head in the middle of the night, and that's always going to be the case. Or when you're at work, it pops into your head that, oh, we need to get milk. So there's little aspects of that, certainly, but I think just kind of promising myself that I'm here because I love this and I love doing this, and I want to keep that promise to myself to be the best architect I can be when I'm here, and the best mom I can be when I'm home.
definitely. It's a tough balance, but yeah, we definitely, I think we keep hearing that people are saying, you focus on what you're doing when you're there and be the best that you can be, and that's what matters. And things might drop here and there eventually, but the overall goal is to do the best that you can in everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
And
think
we
Dana
support
from
each other
Richmond.
too, right? Like,
Right, absolutely. Recognizing, what things can drop. I think Dana from Richmond Public Schools had said, and I thought this was a really good way of phrasing this, of what balls are glass and what balls are rubber.
yeah.
There's going to be aspects of both. Sometimes there's a really important deadline that comes up that means you need to be working later because it's something you really want to get that project. Or sometimes, your child is sick, so you have to be home for them. So there's aspects of that where that has to give. But I think ultimately it makes you better at work and better at home when you have, the rewarding aspects of both, and you've kept that promise to yourself. And I know eventually my son's going to see what I do and be proud of that. And so I think
Yeah.
that's worth the investment that I give it.
Mm-hmm. Eventually he might go to one of the schools that you design. Who knows, right?
That's true. That's true. And then he can be the one to tell me what's
Yeah.
wrong.
Oh man. Well, I will ask one more question before we finish up here. Um, actually, question just popped in. Um, Macy says, speaking to always growing and learning new methods towards design, what has been your experience with the industry adapting to the use of AI, AR, VR, or other new technologies? You'd like to speak in on the design build process too, since you've been out of school.
So I would say in terms of AI, I think it's a tool and you have to know where it makes sense to use it. Use it for the schematic aspects that it can quickly generate ideas. It's not necessarily there yet to be doing construction
Mm-hmm.
documents. And I think that's one of the really cool things also about the AEC industry, that it's not so cut and dry like a math problem that can just be
Right.
solved. There are nuances to it and things that involve critical thinking that maybe eventually AI will be astute enough to be able to do that, but I think it still requires that human aspect of understanding the priorities, and being able to understand the problem and
Mm-hmm.
arrive at a solution that's not going to be as cut and dry as a math problem. So I like AI in that aspect for quick ideas, or quickly putting out something that you can see what it's going to look like, so you don't have to spend a whole bunch of time creating
Mm-hmm.
models or things like that. But I think it, again, it's a tool, not the end all be all.
Yeah, I think in the engineering area as well, it's very basic still. We haven't personally implemented it really at all. But we've like played here and there, like asking questions about system types to see like what it says and compared to what we would actually recommend. And it gets ideas pretty close and it's a decent, but similar to like when we run a load calculation. I'm not just gonna say, okay, that's what it says, that's what it is, we're good to go, because it makes mistakes still,
Right.
right? It's a computer, so it does a lot, but it's not flawless. And one of my favorite examples to give is one time it put 30 people in a closet for one of my loads.
Hmm.
And obviously that's not right, so you have to be able to look at it and see where things are maybe not quite what we actually want, or if there were mistakes, and that takes the like human side of things to recognize that.
Right. And I guess on the design build side, I think that goes back to what we've talked about a lot, of the different expertises in the room of, we may detail it one way, but
Hmm.
if we're in together in the room with a contractor and we have kind of everyone looking at it at the beginning of how's the best way to design this, they can help inform that.
Yeah.
And recognizing kind of who's speaking in what role, because to some extent changes are going to change what the design looks like and the function looks like. But I think there's a lot of things that you can do it one way, but you can also do it two or three other ways that might be equally as good,
Hmm.
but they cost less, or they move faster, or they're easier to get. I mean, we've
Hmm.
seen it's gotten a little bit better after COVID, but the manufacturing delays, sometimes it's really hard to get different products. So if you got someone who has experience with different ways of doing it, you want to listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the experience speaks to a lot, like somebody who's been actually building projects for 30, 40 years knows a lot about how things can fit together and what's actually possible for them to do versus like what I might think is a really great idea might not be feasible, right? And the kind of going back and forth between that to find the best solution.
Right.
Oh, wow. So it's almost 1, and I don't want to keep anybody too late. So let me ask finally any piece of advice that you would have for young professionals joining the industry.
I think it's a great industry to be a part of. I think there are so many different ways to do it. I think that goes into how you're an architect, whether you do K-12 buildings, you do new construction, you do renovation, you do HVAC replacements. There's an architecture component to everything, and same with engineering and construction. I think just again, kind of take the burden off of yourself of feeling like you have to know everything. Find a good group of people that you can go to ask questions. Give yourself the confidence and the chance to ask silly questions, because it's going to help you so much more than you know. And recognize that there's not one version of an architect that wears black glasses and turtlenecks and looks like Steve Jobs or whatever the stereotype is. You can bring your own kind of flavor to what you're doing, and that's a strength.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate this talk with you today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Absolutely. We were very happy to. Yeah, your uniqueness is your strength, and I think you really highlighted that well today. Everyone, if you would like to connect with Lauren on LinkedIn or anything, we'll try to share that with you in the chat. Megan will also share the link to register for our next session, which will be in March on the 19th with Denise Nelson. She recently started up her own consulting firm, so it'll be really cool to talk to somebody who's newly into that area. And we'd love to see everybody here and share it with anyone else that you think would be interested in this. It's been awesome to see it grow so far and continue to be successful for the past year. And Megan, you can also share my LinkedIn stuff as well in the chat if you'd like. And of course, after this, you'll receive an email, everyone who is on the call, with the recording, but we will also have it up on our YouTube page channel. And please subscribe to it too, so that you can get notified if you miss a future session. You can go back and watch it later. Same if you haven't seen any of the earlier ones, you can go watch those. They're already up there. We'd love to have you in March and continuing. And thank you again, Lauren. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great to talk with you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.